Good morning to all of you. First, I would like to welcome Frans Timmermans, our guest, first Vice President of the European Commission, and also José Ignacio Torreblanca. Both of them are going to be protagonists in this event on the future of Europe. For this faculty, it certainly is a privilege, and we very much appreciate the Spanish delegation to the Commission, who have liaised with us to organize this event. It's basically their responsibility, although the newspaper El País is also collaborating in terms of dissemination via their opinion page. For the last month, roughly, we've had another forum in the newspaper El Diario, a digital newspaper on the future of socialism. El Público, a daily newspaper. Now it's evident that the cycle that ended in 1989, that ended the Cold War, has opened up a new cycle with the economic crisis of 2008 making us intensely feel a pinch, and this raised and posed challenges to the old ideologies and political systems. They're not necessarily outdated, but they certainly are those that have been around the longest. So I believe that the day after the British Prime Minister presented the letter requesting the United Kingdom's exit, and unlike what was said in the press yesterday, this is not the first time that anybody has left the EU, perhaps not a full partner, but Greenland is a precedent via Denmark. So, first of all, this isn't a tragedy. Nothing has happened to the European Union in the past. However, it certainly does raise a lot of questions about the future. The new presidency in the United States, unfortunately, I think will increase tension with the rest of the world and also with Europe. And so I certainly believe that it is time to start thinking. And I believe that this is an appropriate event to begin to do just that. I will now give the floor to Professor Aldecoa, who, as most of you know, is one of our greatest experts in European affairs, and he will be making a presentation. He is involved in European studies at the faculty here. Thank you very much, Dean. It is a tremendous satisfaction for me to be here at this event and present the Commissioner, Vice President of the European Commission, Frans Timmermans, and to be with the rest of the invitees and with you here. Unfortunately, I'm also the oldest one here, and I was remembering that in 1968, 49 years ago, I came here. Actually, we were not in this building, we were in the building where the Faculty of Economics is now. And I had the opportunity of discovering the European project through our common teacher, Antonio Triol, who began to tell us that there was a treaty being signed on small Europe, but this was going to open up a new rationale, a new super-rational, national rationale. And I've followed up on the European project since then. The Commission, I'd like to highlight this, presided over by our guest, is a different commission from previous commissions. Its democratic legitimacy is different from those before it. For the first time, according to the Lisbon Treaty, it emanates from elections. And it has very strong support, nearly 60% of the chamber, and there is probably no single European government that has that support. Oftentimes, it's said that the problem lies with Europe. No, the problem lies with European member states. Europe has a stability like it's never had before. And this legislator, which began with a very ambitious program, is marked by Brexit, which undoubtedly has tainted things. We've been afraid of talking about positive aspects, even by indication of the institutions in Europe themselves, so as not to affect the referendum. This is an obstacle in building Europe, 44 years that we have behind us. And now I think that the Commission is very right in putting forward different scenarios. We have 5 scenarios in the white paper. Now, very often we hear criticism about the way this is being put forward. Now we have a Federalist manifesto. Of course, it doesn't say Federalist in this Ventotin manifesto, but really one can feel that it certainly has that feeling about it. We have, as we mentioned before, the cradle of Europeanism. I don't know whether we have them here with us right now. Enrique Barón, Josep Borrell are in this faculty, and very commissioners. Marcelino Oreja was a professor of diplomatic law here, and Pedro Solbes also. And we could continue and continue. Former ambassadors, 6 who were students here. Now, I would simply say that those who have chosen to be here, and I have my colleague from NNC with me as well, we would very much like to be even more. I remember that in my department, Aranzazu, this is aimed at you, Teresa Aranzazu from the European office here in Madrid. This would be my great desire, to have even more students become illustrated proponents of Europe, advocates of Europe.
Tengo aquí en el agujero este.
Dictar. The setting was the choice of the decan.
12
Yes.
y media.
12:30. Te hago un señale.
Sí, perfecto. Perfecto. To my right.
Whatever you
Vale.
¿Vale? Y tienes que decir a la gente cuando pregunte que se levanten, ¿vale? Para que
Vale.
lo podamos realizar correctamente.
De acuerdo. We can stand for a while, right? Then maybe we can sit down later. Bueno, pues si os parece, vamos a empezar. Bueno, es un placer tener aquí al vicepresidente primero de la Comisión, Frans Timmermans.
It is a pleasure to be with Frans Timmermans, first Vice President of the European Commission. He also is a graduate of political sciences. He's from the Labour Party in Holland, and he couldn't have been born in a better place to be pro-European. He was born in Maastricht. That's perhaps destiny. We are very appreciative to him for being here, and I think this is a very good format. It's novel. We're live on Facebook broadcasting this, and we're going to be able to get some questions from our audience listening to us out there. And I would like to join in congratulating the faculty. I also have a degree from this faculty, and we're at a very important time in Europe. Now let's begin. Vice President understands everything Spanish. He fully understands everything, but he will express himself in English. We will be taking some of your questions. You can ask your questions in Spanish. And perhaps we can begin because this is the week of Brexit. Many of us thought, you yourself said this when we negotiated Article 50, it was sort of fictitious. We had to build it into the treaty. And we did a bit of a survey in the newspaper over the last few days, and I'd like to show it to you here to give our Vice President how people are feeling about Brexit. We asked people whether they were sorry or happy that the British were leaving. So let's see a raise of hands. How many of you out there are happy to see the UK leave, the British leave? And those of you who are sorry? The rest of you are cold. Well, this is perhaps the first question, because there are many Spanish students who traditionally have spent their summers in learning English in the United Kingdom. They found jobs there. And many students have actually continued their studies with scholarships in the UK. And they've been writing us asking, what's going to happen to my future? Many of them are seeking jobs. Some of them have married, have settled there, and they're postponing many important of life's decisions. What's going to happen to people? What are the consequences for people in this younger generation, understanding that people could come and go as they wish?
for being here this morning. It's a great honor for me to see all of you here and to have an exchange on what is our common future, which is Europe. And indeed, the debate on Brexit is essential for our future. And the message you gave by raising your hand is a message every single European wants to give to the Brits. We're sad that you're leaving. Not because it costs us money, not because it makes trade more difficult. We are sad you are leaving because we believe you belong to us. You are part of our family. And people are sad if a member of their family leaves or chooses no longer to be part of the family. Secondly, this brings me to your question. With without EU, Britain is part of Europe. Some, for ideological reasons, believe that the English Channel is twice as wide as the Atlantic Ocean. But geography is geography and facts are facts. The United Kingdom can choose to leave the European Union but cannot choose to leave Europe. And this should be our attitude in the next couple of years. First and foremost, for our citizens. Whatever we do for our citizens. And our citizens will be traveling to the UK, will be looking for opportunity in the UK. British people will continue to look for opportunity in Europe. And I think we are under a moral duty to make sure that whatever happens in Brexit, our citizens do not suffer. And that their dreams and revendications can be fulfilled even after the UK leaves. And by the way, let me end on this. Our societies are diverse and open. The future of our societies is to be open and diverse. Those political forces who promise a better future by stopping or turning back, rolling back diversity, are promising something they can never deliver on. Our societies are like scrambled eggs. Try to unscramble scrambled eggs. You could try it in your kitchen. It becomes a huge mess and then you have no eggs left. That is how our societies are. And we need to embrace diversity as the future, as our strength, and not see it as a weakness. I would have that attitude in the negotiations on Brexit. Let's put our citizens first.
Y sin embargo, las negociaciones no parecen haber empezado.
Well, it seems that this isn't starting out on a good foot because the United Kingdom has rejected in its parliament and in the House of Lords ensure from the very first day the rights of European citizens. This is going to have to be a hard negotiation right from the outset. We have an expression in Spanish, I don't know what the equivalent in Dutch might be, but it's a dogged struggle.
Whatever people may say now on the political side in the UK or in Europe, I have not met one politician in any of these circles who says, let's use the people as a bargaining chip. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. So I know we're at early stages now and we need to, today the Council will establish the guidelines for the negotiations. So we'll have to wait and see. But nobody wants to use people as a bargaining chip. So the rights of the people, the 3 million Brits living on the continent, the 3 million Europeans living in the UK, the 1 million Brits living on the continent, their interest, should be safeguarded. We should be very careful what we do with that. It's not easy, it's complicated, I know, but these people shouldn't suffer because of Brexit, and this should be one of the first premises of our negotiation.
No vamos a esperar al final de...
We're going to be able to take questions about this issue, about Brexit, as of now. We don't have to wait until the end. You can just raise your hands just so as not to leave everything for the end. There was a question back there. Hello?
It's gone. Thank you for that question. It's a very important question. A construction like the European Union with 28 member states is like a planetary system. And everything is kept in balance because of the relative position of every planet vis-à-vis the other planets. Now what's going to happen, one of the biggest planets in that planetary system is going to be taken out, which means that all the other planets will have to realign and find a position in a union of 27. So everybody will be looking for where's my position going to be. One thing is for sure, the balance, because Britain leaves, is going to tilt more towards the south. So the center of gravity of this planetary system will be more to the south than it is now. That is a logical consequence of the United Kingdom leaving. In that context, a nation with a vision on Europe which is shared broadly by its population, a nation like Spain, a nation with the ambition to be a leading nation in Europe like Spain, a nation which is very quickly catching up with the leading economies of Europe. Spain is doing extremely well. That nation has an incredible opportunity to lead Europe into the future. So this, Brexit makes me very sad, don't get me wrong. But for a nation like Spain, if it has the ambition to lead Europe into the future, the possibilities are really very big. And I would encourage it. This is what I will say to Prime Minister Rajoy when I see him later. I said it to ministers yesterday. Don't underestimate the possibilities Spain has to be a leading nation in Europe for the generation to come.
Muy bien. Una pregunta más sobre...
Just another question about Brexit. We've seen over the last few days a debate. I'm exaggerating a bit, but between those who have a sort of more punitive approach, a harsher approach, we have to be very harsh with the UK, especially because we don't want anybody to follow their example. And then there are those who believe that we need to be firm, but not necessarily severe. They need to pay their fair share of things, but nothing that could be interpreted as harsh or punitive. What is your opinion on the approach that the negotiations will be taking? It's going to be a sort of two-phased negotiation. First, deconnection, and then a sort of reconnection. Although the UK doesn't seem to want to take this approach. So what is the Commission's philosophy? Deconnection and reconnection.
It's the 23rd of June last year. Did we see many countries saying, hey, that seems to be a good idea, let's follow this example?
Trump said so.
Yeah, whatever Trump says. We could go into that, but that's more...
Yes. I'm sure they went to listen to it.
Probably more comical than anything. But anyway, what you see is two things. All nations, the 27, saying, guys, let's not try this at home. There's not one nation in Europe that has sort of increased its feeling, oh, this might be a good idea. I think Brexit had a sobering effect, even without yet knowing what the consequences will be. On most nations, it had a sobering effect. Even people like Marine Le Pen no longer openly say, I want to leave the European Union. So that would be my first conclusion. Secondly, do you really think you can convince countries to stay in the European Union by punishing the Brits for leaving? Absolutely not. It doesn't work like that. We're not in kindergarten here. Countries will draw their own conclusions. If it's in their advantage to stay, they will stay. If they believe it's better for them to leave, they will leave, regardless of how we deal with the Brits. But, and this is your second scenario, hey, if you want to leave, it's up to you. That's why we have Article 50. Every member state has the right to leave the European Union. But if you want to leave, you need a settlement, like in any divorce. And that settlement has to be fair on all parties. And if you have prior engagements, you need to make sure you honor your prior engagements. It's only logical. And so you have to negotiate about that. In a courteous way, in an open way, also in a firm way. Because we're not talking about peanuts here. We're talking about some fundamental issues we need to settle. So not to punish. It's nothing having to do with punishing. It's just that everybody can be asked to honor their commitments. And that's how I think we should do this negotiation.
Muy bien, hemos sido generosos con el Reino Unido, les hemos permitido.
Well, we've been generous with the UK, and we've allowed them many concessions for decades. and now is probably not the time to become harsh. Any other questions back there, please? And then we'll change to another topic afterwards and talk about the future.
Ok.
Cogemos uno.
Vale.
En cuanto empieces a hablar, se activa.
Vale. No,
Empieza a hablar y se activa, creo.
Empieza tú,
Sí.
empieza tú.
Si no lo han pagado bien.
Vale.
Y luego empezamos con esta pregunta
Vale.
entonces.
We'll start with this question then. Yes, related to the previous question, you mentioned that the South could gain presence in Europe, although what we're seeing with these initial declarations is sort of Germany pounding its fist on the table. Now, I would ask, isn't it possible that Brexit could actually shift things more in Germany's favor?
The relative position of a country in the European Union is a combination of two factors: its own ambition and the ambition of the others. You know, if we think Germany is too powerful, there are no vacuums in politics. If others leave the room, Germany will take that room. But if others create a balance and are active and present, then Germany will accept that and will deal with that. You know, this is how it works. It's a planetary system, and if you do not want to use the weight you have, others will use their weight more. It's how it works in political life and in Europe. And in that sense, you know, we had quite a period of political uncertainty in Spain. And I, as someone working in Brussels, I missed Spain in that period. And now Spain is back, and it's important. And Spain is also back with a very pro-European message, if I listened carefully to what the Prime Minister said in Malta the other day. And I think there is quite a large consensus also in Spanish society about that, which gives Spain the possibility to punch quite above its weight in this situation. I would say use that opportunity.
De acuerdo. Y la pregunta que teníamos ahí al fondo, seguimos
Let's see whether we can get back to the connection in the back of the room and get that other question.
No, probably. Yeah. Thank you very much. The position of the Commission on the Scottish referendum. Thank you.
You want two positions, my personal one and the official?
For the same money.
There is no difference. That's an internal matter for the United Kingdom. That is not a matter I have any comments on. This is something they need to sort out in the United Kingdom. We are dealing with the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom is the member state. And we have a relationship with them. The United Kingdom has expressed a wish to leave the European Union. We will negotiate on the basis of Article 50. Whatever happens within the United Kingdom is their own internal matter. The one thing in the United Kingdom where I think there is a direct, very important European role is the relationship between the United Kingdom and the Republic of Ireland. Because one of the most important historic achievements in the last 30 years is the Good Friday Agreement, which put an end to one of the most horrible terrorist episodes and episodes of strife in modern European history. I think we are all under a moral and political obligation to make sure that this miracle, which is the Good Friday Agreement, stays strong, survives, and isn't harmed by Brexit. I think this is the one area pertaining to the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland where I would say all of us Europeans have a keen interest in assuring that the peace in the north of Ireland is maintained and is strengthened and is not put into jeopardy because of the United Kingdom leaving the European Union.
Bien, teníamos una pregunta más aquí y cambiamos.
We have another question, and then we'll switch to another topic. If you could please take the microphone over here, and then for the other two.
Presentación y quería
Thanks very much for your presentation. I wanted to ask a question about European citizens. At the beginning, you said that European citizens shouldn't be bargaining chips, but I'm a bit concerned about rights that European citizens have in England. What is the procedure going to be? Are their rights going to be respected? Will they be entitled to retirement, their payments into the social security system, and so forth? And also today, the President of England said that this is going to be negotiated. What stance could the European Union take on this?
Allí, perdón.
Yes. Okay, well, write that down, and then please stand up so that the cameras can catch you.
Like an old saying states that if we don't learn from our past, we're destined to repeat it. And in this beautiful white book, there is stated that the federative ideology is like a primal, like the teacher stated, a primal thing on the EU. Which policies do you believe that should be carried out in order to prevent this from happening again when it comes to educating our countries in more European citizenship rather than nationalisms? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. By the way, I'm a thoroughly convinced feminist. So ladies, come on, speak up. Don't let only the guys.
I got one.
Do you want me to answer these questions now?
Yes, go ahead, yeah.
Your question is very pertinent. What does this mean concretely for the rights of citizens? And this is something where we have to be very careful in the coming months and years. I only wanted to say in my introduction, there is no one who wants to use citizens as hostages in this. No one. Not on the British side, not on the European side. But at the same time, we will have to be very concrete about the rights people have. Now, what I found interesting in the debate in the UK this week was that David Davis, Theresa May, were now all of a sudden saying, well, we actually don't know whether we will need less migration. We might need this level of migration. I was speaking to Sadiq Khan in my office earlier this week, the Mayor of London, who said this level of migration for London will be essential also in the future. We need these people. So which sort of, one wonders, hang on, what did you all say during the Brexit campaign? This was about migration, you said, or what was it about, if you still need those levels? So I'm not too worried, but you're absolutely right. We have to be very careful that the rights of people are not infringed upon, and we will have to talk with them on that extensively. The second part of your question now escapes me. Sorry, you had the second part of the question.
On the security, blackmail or
right.
whatever.
You can't blackmail someone with one of your own existential requirements. I can't go and blackmail someone and say, you know, if you don't do what I want, I will shoot myself in the foot. Usually that doesn't work, you know, it only hurts yourself. So there is no real possibility for blackmail there, because security for the United Kingdom, even if they're not in the EU, will stay an essential requirement for themselves. So I don't see this as a blackmail. I don't see the possibility to blackmail anyone on that. I think it will only hurt everyone, and I don't see it happening.
La otra pregunta era, ¿cómo construimos?
We have another question, and that is, how do we build a European spirit?
My own country, I came out and I said, guys, this is something that was made by people. It can be destroyed by people. And they say, what are you saying? I said, well, the European Union could fall apart. And then in my country, there was a strong reaction in the media. Whoa, this Timmermans, this is our most pro-European guy saying that Europe could fall apart. Yes, it can. The first thing we need to realize, especially your generation, the young generation, what you take for granted, what you think is eternal, could fall apart. And if you don't become more active, more committed, if you don't have a plan of how you want Europe to be in the future, this could fall apart. You have a huge responsibility to become active in this. We see now the first signs of young people across the European Union going into the streets and saying, hey, this is our Europe, protect it, don't destroy it. So that is the first thing. Second remark, what won the Brexit debate in the UK? One phrase, take back control. To take back control is a phrase that resounds in every single member state. Because people have the feeling that in this fourth industrial revolution, they are no longer in control of their own destinies. Things are happening that will take away our jobs, take away our social security, make our lives more difficult, and we have no control. It is globalization, and Europe is an agent of globalization. Europe is not an agent to protect me against the negative sides of globalization. If we don't change that paradigm, if we don't prove that Europe is an instrument of 450 million people to collectively shape our future so that globalization doesn't weaken us but strengthen us, if we can't get people to go there, then the European project is doomed. Because we need to take back control of our destinies. Many of you young people here, you were children, young children, when this crisis started. In your collective experience, there is only crisis, especially in this country. And still you come out of this optimistic, healthy, forward-looking. And this should be a lesson to all those other Europeans who have a tendency to become pessimistic very quickly. The young generation in Spain still has hope for the future, even though they were one of the hardest hit parts of our collective European population over the last 10 years. Use that optimism, use it well. We are in a post-paternalistic society. We are no longer the old guys telling the young guys what to do. But if I can be so bold as to say one thing, you are not ideological like my generation, but you are at least as idealist as my generation, probably more so. Use that idealism, shape the world like you want it to be. Become active, get together with other young people. Don't assume that if you put something on Facebook, it will happen all by itself. And look around the world. If you don't become, look at your friends in the United Kingdom, how sad that they are that their parents chose against something they wanted passionately. Don't let that happen elsewhere. See that as a warning signal that you have to be active. Look at what happened in the United States, where something comparable happened as well. Again, don't let those who want to close our societies, who think that protection is an exclusion of others, who want to brand a religion as a threat to our survival, who want to go back to a Europe where we look for scapegoats and we put minorities in the doghouse. Let's not go there. Let's avoid that. It's not necessary at all. And let's look for optimism, because in the fourth industrial revolution there are opportunities. And let me end on this. In my great-grandparents' time, illiteracy was the biggest problem in many societies, especially for the working classes, the classes I come from. So for my grandparents and my parents, getting us into education, making sure we finished school and did our best in school, that was, taking the escalator up. That was their vision for our future. We threaten to come into a new form of illiteracy now. Illiteracy in the past was not being able to read and write. Illiteracy in the future will be not being able to learn. Because in the future we have to be able to learn new things throughout our lives. And our educational systems should be ready to teach people to learn. and that they retain the capacity to learn until the day they retire and even beyond. Because adaptivity will be the buzzword in the fourth industrial revolution. Creativity, adaptivity are going to bring us into this new world. And there are huge opportunities, but we have to be able to adapt, and we need to be creative. Robots are a reality. They are a reality. The thing is, how do we use our minds? How do we develop services to put robots to our service? And some very tough questions we will have to ask. And let me say one word about that. Social Europe. What do we do as Europeans together in the social field? Should we not be having, given the robotization of our economy, should we not be having a debate about universal basic income? I think we should. I think it becomes unavoidable sometimes. People say, oh, that's left-wing radicalism. But think it through. Think it through. If labor productivity doesn't bring you what it used to bring, what is going to bring? And these are the things we need to be talking about. Sorry for being so long.
Desde luego creo que nadie más en esta...
No, naturally, I don't think that anybody else ever again will accuse the European Commission of being technocratic and bureaucratic. We have an activist commissioner here. There are a couple of questions here. Yes, first here.
Questions. And Tajani says then European Parliament wants to allow London to withdraw from Brexit. And is it true? Is this an alternative way? How do you see that proposal? And the second, how many speeds of the European Union are you planning? 2, 3 more?
How many, sorry?
How many? Speeds.
Speeds, okay, yeah. Okay.
¿Podemos coger esta pregunta al lado también?
Could you also ask the question and then over there? Yes, I'm a doctor in psychology. I have a doctorate in psychology, and I work mostly with the elderly. And I'm very, very concerned, particularly in Spain, but throughout Europe. In Spain, very soon, 30% of our population will be elderly. And we're not inserted. We're not in the mainstream. How are we going to finance our retirement? And we're being stripped of half of our pensions, of our retirement. I'm demanding answers here in Spain and also in Europe. Thank you. Yes, well, we were actually going to open up the question of the future after Brexit, just so as not to only focus on Brexit. The Commission has put out 5 different scenarios for the future of Europe, from more integration to less integration, integration with only certain countries on certain issues, and perhaps that would be a framework for answering that question after the pessimism, after Brexit. Do we need a multi-speed Europe? Can we move forward that way? And we'll get into questions on social Europe as well. There are also issues not only about youth, but about aging, as you've heard.
This question, Brexit is happening. Let's stop dreaming about it not happening, about the Brits changing their minds. Our attitude should be, it's happening, and we need to do as little harm as possible to all involved. That is my attitude. Sort of a Hippocratic oath. Do as little harm as possible to all involved. So any resolution or ideas that they might change their mind, forget it. It's done. They will leave. And we need to be as constructive as possible for the future relationship. Multi-speed Europe. We already have multi-speed Europe. In Schengen, in the Euro, now in the European Public Prosecutor's Office, and in quite a number of areas. What is the idea behind this? We all go in the same direction. But given the difference in development, political position, economic position, some will be able to go in that direction quicker than others. Should we always let the speed of how we move forward be dictated by the slowest ship in the convoy? I don't think so. I think it is to the benefit of all that some countries that want to move a bit faster get the opportunity to do that. The alternative is either to just have Europe move at an incredibly slow speed, or that some countries might want to have arrangements outside the European Union with other countries that want to move quicker ahead. This is what I say to especially people and countries in Central Eastern Europe who say, we don't want this because we don't want to be left behind. I say, well, this is the way to keep everyone together, having multi-speed possibilities. If you don't offer them, if you don't continue to offer them because we already have them, people might think in terms of alternatives, which I think is worse for everyone. Now the issue of our demographic development. Our demographic development is a huge challenge. And look at our societies today. We are getting children much later than our parents did, at least 10 years later, sometimes even more. We now have, in most families, most countries, both partners in the relationship have a full-time job, or at least have jobs if they have jobs, if they're not unemployed. They come at an age between 35 and 55 where their parents become needy and need some support, etc. So in a society like ours, the society pivots on this group, 35, 55, middle-class people, and usually they are doing well. But in our societies, they are still doing okay, but these people are now very worried for the future because there is so much pressure on them. Educating the children, do we have the right schools? Do we have enough places where the children can go? Oh my God, my parents, I need to take care of them. Can I take them in my home? There is no decent care for the elderly, so I have to do it myself. All of this. And it's the middle, the people in the middle that are too squeezed in European societies. And much of the pessimism in our societies comes from that. So fixing that means better education and better educational facilities that take into account this. A much better balance between men and women in the burden of who takes care of work and the family. We still get that completely wrong. Even in the most progressive households, if you are honest, you will see that women will do much more of the work in a household than men. Still like that, it's cultural. We need to change that. Also, we need to make sure that people can work much longer if they want, not because they need to, but there are so many, I mean, I remember my grandparents, at 60 they were old because they had started working at 14 in the coal mines. Then at 60 you're old. But people now at 60 are young and vital, and use that force. We will need to, also because we are going to have a huge shortage of labor in the years to come. We need people to stay active as long as possible. We need new technology of sensing people so that they can live longer on their own, and then if something's wrong with their health, they are connected so that the doctor can see it from a distance and then decide whether to intervene, etc. All these things we need to do. And we need to give people the opportunity to stay active longer. And I am a true believer in something Willy Brandt said. Willy Brandt said, positive change in society is always based on an agreement between grandparents and grandchildren. Let's make this true. Because the people in the middle, us, we are too squeezed. But people who are young are still optimistic and full of ideas. People who are no longer in the middle have the space to think about creative solutions. We need to use that, and it's very important. And if we get this right in our societies, we will be fine.
Teníamos por allí otras dos preguntas, pero también además.
Okay, we have some questions over here. In addition to talking about solidarity between different generations, what about solidarity with those who are outside Europe? We have a global migratory crisis. Europe is inward-looking, talking about its own crises and problems, but there are people out there who are aspiring to a future like what we have in Europe, and they're drowning on the way here, or they're blocked between different countries. Shouldn't we be outward looking? What about our policies vis-a-vis the outside world to stem the causes that are bringing them here? It doesn't seem that we're up to the task of doing that or of welcoming them here when they arrive. The Commission was very harsh this week with the member states after the celebrations over the weekend. Monday was a harsh day where people heard about not being up to their commitments in the member states. And here in our country, people poured out onto the streets in favor of welcoming people. And the response isn't in accordance with European values.
I've said this in the Council of Ministers many times. You come here in Brussels, you agree on something, and then you go home and you don't do it. That is what feeds into Euroscepticism. You agree here in Brussels to take a number of refugees because 2 of our member states are heavily overburdened, Greece and Italy. You agree to do that, and then you don't do it. That undermines the collective responsibility we have for our common future. But apart from that, look at what happened since 2015 in the European population. We need to be extremely careful. I passionately believe we need a Europe when people arrive because they flee from war and persecution, that they have a safe haven in Europe. Paradoxically, we can only guarantee that with the support of the European people if we at the same time have instruments to not have to receive everyone who seeks a better future coming to Europe. In other words, the distinction between refugees and migrants is essential if we want to continue to offer a safe refuge to refugees. And for migrants, we will have to find another solution. If you look at the people who arrived through Libya into Italy last year, almost 300,000. The vast majority of these people do not have refugee status. They do not have the right to international protection. These are people who want a better future for themselves. I don't dispute that they want that. It's a human feeling and everybody. But we are not under an obligation to give that to them. So they should go back to the countries they come from. But if we can't send them back to abject poverty and no perspective on improvement, so we need to increase substantially our efforts to create development in the countries of origin. We need to have long-term relationships with the countries of origin, not on issues of taking back their citizens, but on how do we help you develop? How do we create more opportunities for trade to the European Union? How do we help you with your security challenges? How do we help you solve conflicts with your neighbors or internal conflicts? These are the things where Europe should be investing into much more. Because I know it's nice to have this highbrow, intellectual, humanitarian attitude. Everybody who comes to Europe should be welcome. But this is not the position of a vast majority of the European people. There is still solidarity in the European population for accepting refugees. But there's no support in the European population for letting everyone come into Europe who wants to come into Europe. And if we don't fix this, if we don't have European level sustainable answers to this challenge, the extreme right will be much more powerful in many of our member states, because the people, if they are pushed too much, they will want to keep out everyone from Europe, even refugees. We are not there yet, and it is our moral duty to avoid our society go down that path.
How do you believe the British are taking the agreement, the Brexit agreement? How do you think they're taking it themselves?
Hello, thank you very much for coming here, first of all. And I don't know if you have settled common grounds in the beginning of the negotiations, but is it possible for a member state to individually make a bilateral agreement with the UK now, like in these 2 years of them going out of the Union? Thank you.
¿Había alguna pregunta más ahí? Hay un montón de preguntas. Qué bien.
A whole lot of questions. Hello, good morning. The question is, how will relations between the EU and Turkey play out as of now? Okay, we have a couple of questions about Brexit and Turkey over there that put us in a bit of a bind. A bit, yes.
Brexit is seen in the UK. Many people in the UK said, okay, we voted, now we're out, and it's working well. People think it's already happened. And I think that many people will be surprised once the negotiations go on what is going to happen. And I think many people will say, hey, they never told us this. They never told us that now I need to get a passport and vaccination for my cat if we want to take the cat across to France. They never told us that we will have huge lines of trucks waiting in Dover because they need to be checked before. They never told us this, they never told us that. I think we will have quite a number of those moments in the years to come. And there's another, perhaps I could expand slightly on that. There's another phenomenon here. In the populist view of democracy, it is winner takes all. So if I win an election, then I represent the will of the people. So this was 52 was for Brexit, 48 was to stay in the EU, but those 48, in the eyes of the Brexiteers, disappeared on the 24th of June. And the people are now on one position. Like in the United States, the people are for Trump. Hey, I think if you look at the popular vote, Clinton got 3 million more. But anyway, the people. And the others no longer disappear. This is an essential question for us Europeans. We are in a diverse society. We are in a rule of law-based society. And the ancient Greeks already knew democracy is not the tyranny of the majority. Democracy is always about respecting the rights of the minority. Because today's minority is tomorrow's majority. And if the minority today feels that it is oppressed by the majority, it will feel the need to oppress itself once it becomes the majority. So this winner-takes-all vision of democracy is a threat to democracy itself. And we need to confront the populists with that. Because they say, I will give the power to you, the people, now for the first time. Then the people vote for that person. You have voted for me, which means that what I think is what the people think. And anybody who doesn't agree with me is an enemy of the people. You see this happening. And this is not how you can sustain a democracy in a diverse society. And I really want to take issue with that, because for Europe, with all those differences within our member states and between member states, respect for the minority is essential. Is essential. Now I got carried away and I need to think again about the question about can you have individual agreements with member states. I can't blame the Brits for trying. That's what they will try in any negotiation. I can't blame them. So it's up to the 27 to stay together on this. There is a strong will of the 27 to stay together, very strong will. There is a strong will on the side of the Commission, Michel Barnier and others, to make sure that we clearly represent the diverging interests of the 27. There is only one way we can get out of this with as little harm as possible, and that is when the 27 stay united and we have one agreement pertaining to Brexit, which covers the interest of all 27. No separate agreements. Turkey, my favorite subject. Look, we are in a politically very difficult period of time because of the referendum on the 16th of April. We've seen the President of Turkey accusing several European nations of being Nazis, which I think is a completely unacceptable claim or unacceptable accusation. The relationship is now difficult. As far as the refugee issue is concerned, which was my personal involvement with this, we have difficult relations on many things. Human rights are under pressure. Politicians are in prison that should not be in prison. The press is under huge pressure. But as far as the agreement on the refugees is concerned, the Turks have done what they promised. And we have done what we have promised. We've never been as quick in dispersing aid to refugees before. We now have, for Syrian refugees in Turkey, they have these credit cards where they can get food, which they like a lot and works well. We've increased educational facilities for the children tremendously, which works well. Medical facilities works well. Housing, it works well. So whatever difficulty we have in our relationship with Turkey, and these difficulties are many because I'm very worried about the internal developments in Turkey, on refugees we still work with them, and they have done what they promised on that. And I think this has led to a situation where the refugees in Turkey are in a better situation, much better than before. People no longer drown in the Aegean Sea, or very limited numbers, fortunately. But we need to think about our relationship with Turkey after the 16th of April. Anything we say before the 16th of April would be construed as a provocation and would give this or that party the opportunity to start fighting and shouting again. I'm not going to go into that. But we will have to see after the 16th of April how we look at our relationship with Turkey. Turkey is not going anywhere. This is geography again, huh? Standing with our backs to Turkey, it's tempting, but it's not going to go away. It's there. And all the people in the opposition in Turkey, the journalists, the writers, political activists, NGOs, they all say one thing to us: don't abandon us, don't go away, don't sever the ties. And I really want to listen to them when I think about our future relationship with Turkey.
Y hablando de democracia, vamos a coger algunas preguntas.
Interesting comments about democracy. Talking about democracy and human rights, are you satisfied with the response in Hungary and Poland regarding certain doubts about the rule of law being upheld there? Do we have a problem of fundamental rights and freedoms within the EU?
There is not a challenge in some area in terms of the rule of law and human rights. We all have to be critical of our own countries and of what's happening everywhere. But in this specific case, Hungary and Poland, they want to be part of the European Union passionately. They want to be part of our common future passionately. They want to be in the internal market passionately. They want the structural funds passionately. I think it's the duty of all other member states, not just the Commission, to talk to them and say, if you want all of that so passionately, that doesn't go without the rule of law. Because Europe, the internal market, the common currency, these are just tools. They are not goals in themselves. Structural funds are tools, not goals in themselves. The goals are the values enshrined in Article 2 of the treaty. And rule of law is an essential element of this. The separation of powers is an essential element of this. The independence of courts is an essential element of this. The freedom of the media is an essential element in all of this. And it is high time that all member states would feel the personal responsibility to have a dialogue with all other member states about the state of the rule of law in Europe. The European Union, you cannot have a common market, an internal market without the rule of law. Because the internal market presupposes the equal application of all EU law in the same way in all member states. And if the courts are not independent and work under instruction of the government, we no longer have the guarantee that EU law is applied in the same way across the European Union, and then we no longer have an internal market. So this is all linked to each other, and we need to be very careful not to let this go.
Tenemos solo 10 minutos más, por favor pasa el micrófono allí, tenemos una pregunta. Sí.
We have a question at the back. Yes, well, as a stateless refugee, I'd like to ask you three things. First of all, do you think Europe can consider its future when right now it's been unable to tackle the refugee challenge? In countries like Lebanon, they have 1.5 million refugees there, and Europe has been unable to settle 200,000 or 300,000. Secondly, what about the Schengen space and the refugee crisis? And thirdly, how can you give 6 billion euros to a country, in my opinion, that's undemocratic like Turkey, that violates human rights, just to quell this refugee crisis? Many of the refugees were leaving Turkey. Thank you.
Question I didn't understand.
The 6 billion for Turkey.
That was the third. Okay.
Con una cuarta pregunta que viene vía Twitter de ¿para cuándo una policía?
The fourth question, when will we have common border police for the EU?
We are working on the common border controls, and it's working. The European Common Coast and Border Guard is now up and running, and it's working more and more and better. Now let me clarify one thing about these 3 billion, and let me be very, very clear with you. We are not giving 3 billion euros to Turkey. We are not giving 3 billion euros to Turkey. We are spending 3 billion euros for refugees in Turkey. We are buying food for that. We are building schools for that. We are building hospitals for that. That's what we're doing with that money, and it's money well spent. And I really want to insist on that. It's money well spent, because the refugees in Turkey, the Syrian refugees in Turkey, are much better off than in many, many other places they are. And this is because we have invested also so massively in that. Secondly, you are absolutely right. If you look at a country like Lebanon, 1/4 of the population is refugees. A country like Jordan, incredible how many refugees they take. Countries in that area take a huge responsibility. And we fail to give them enough support. We could just, this is relatively easy. It's about money. And we should be doing more to support countries like Jordan and Lebanon and others in providing for these refugees. By the way, it is better for these refugees if we can provide the right level of sustenance and living conditions to be close to Syria. Because the further they are removed from Syria, the lower the chance that they will return to Syria once there is peace. The closer they stay to Syria, the more opportunity that when there is peace, they will go back. Because if you are in a completely different cultural environment, you will have to adapt. If you go to Sweden or Germany or the Netherlands, you will have to adapt, and you will do all your best to be part of that society. And if you've done that for 5 or 6 years and you are integrated, you don't want to go back to where you came from. But if you are in the neighborhood, you will want to go back. And who is going to rebuild Syria if not the Syrians? This is a wasteland. It's been laid to waste for so many years. It's terrible. 5 million Syrians have left the country. This was a middle-income country. This was not some destroyed country at the outset. These were people living lives not too much removed from our lives. And we need to give them the opportunity to do that. And once again, let me be also very, very clear on this. We can be the moral knights who say, let everybody come to Europe. But we will lose our populations if we have that attitude. Europeans will not accept that attitude of us, even if perhaps we would like to have that attitude. What I want to safeguard is this fundamental humanitarian and European principle that he or she who flees from persecution has a safe haven here. And to do that, we will have to find other solutions for migrants. Look at what's happening in member states. Do you think Germany could take another summer of 2015 without this having very, very serious political consequences? No. And we need to find sustainable solutions. And some countries will have to accept that solidarity is needed here, and from everyone, from every single country. And now I've forgotten one question, I think, or not?
No, I think you did quite well.
Okay.
On that. Ahí teníamos para una pregunta, sí. Mira, aquí está levantado.
We have another question here, there. Okay, there and then there.
Back to Brexit, but it's about the future of the European Union. So
Yes.
I'm a bit skeptical of a thing you said at the very beginning of the presentation, that Brexit has had a sobering effect on the European Union. Because, well, I study in the Netherlands, and I'm Italian, and I see that in the Netherlands, for instance, the party of Geert Wilders is, I think, the third most popular party in the country. Second, even, sorry. And then in Italy, for instance, since Renzi left, there's this party called Movimento 5 Stelle that is anti-European openly, and they are, I think now, they have a very big possibility of winning the elections that are yet to come. And I think in France, for instance, if Le Pen is to win in May, then we have another problem. Like, that's, how do you think that the possibility of a domino effect of Brexit, how likely is that? That's my only question.
I honestly believe that Brexit had a sobering effect and not a domino effect. The movement in France, which is led by Marine Le Pen, was 20 years in building up. This had nothing to do with Brexit. It was there before and it's going to be there after. Of course, we all have quite a challenge if she wins the elections. There's no doubt about that. This is the most important election in Europe this year. And it has an influence on the future of Europe. Of course, no doubt about that. But I know a bit about my own country. Mr. Wilders came out second party in the election, but every analysis, every public analysis of public opinion shows that there is a strong majority of Dutch people who want to stay in the European Union. They don't like Brussels, they don't like the institutions, but they want to stay in the European Union. They want to keep the euro as a common currency, a large majority of Dutch people. So there is not always a correlation between voting populist and wanting to leave the European Union. Italy is a bit more complicated because of the effects of the crisis, which were much harsher in Italy than in the Netherlands. And Euroscepticism, which is a relatively new phenomenon in Italy, has now become a very wide phenomenon, which affects large parts of the population. You're absolutely right there. But I don't see a strong popular support in Italy for leaving the European Union. I haven't seen that either. So we're not in a situation where others leave. Actually, I have to add one thing. Since Brexit, the support for staying in the EU in the Netherlands has gone up, not down. So if there is a Brexit effect, it is in favor of staying in the EU. But the disenchantment with the EU, the Euroscepticism, is much older than Brexit. And it has been building up over decades. This is many, many reasons for this. But one of the reasons is that after 1989, when we had this historic opportunity to enlarge the European Union, the assumption was in the old member states, hey, the wall's gone, these new countries will come in, and they will all become like us. And then, of course, they don't. They stay themselves, like every country. And so the Union as a whole has changed. And if you combine this change in the Union with the challenges of globalization, people say, hey, where's my world? My world's gone. I want my world back. And so there's a lot of what I would call Westalgia in the old member states as well. And we need to fix that. We need to have plans for the future. And by the way, had we not had enlargement when we could do it with Central and Eastern Europe, what Putin is doing now in Ukraine, he would be doing in the Baltic states, he would be doing in Poland, he would be doing in Slovakia and in other places.
Bueno, tenemos que ir concluyendo. Teníamos esta última pregunta. De todas maneras, tenéis que saber que el vicepresidente es un fan de Facebook.
We have another questions. There's going to be more Facebook Live. He's a big fan, but we have to get a couple of questions and then close. Yes, speaking of money and multinationals and mines and markets, the UK is facing a hole of 145 million. And don't you think that's going to be a handicap for them? And then we have 48% of the people over the 2-year period until the deadline comes. Don't you think they'll have an impact in the way the UK behaves?
Negotiations, money will come up, and you know, I think we are right, the 27 and the Commission, to stick to the point that if you entered into commitments, even in a divorce, you have to honor those commitments. You can't just walk away. You have obligations, rights, but also obligations. So that is my first point. On your second point, sorry, then now.
Sí, podría haber quizá un segundo referéndum porque
Yes. Look, I know the Brits a bit. I went to school in British schools, so I know them a bit, as far as you can know them as a foreigner. No, they will not listen to you if you go and tell them that they were wrong or they did something. The only thing that can work is for reality to bite. And you know, in an election, I have some experience with that. People will vote. You see it in the United States. They vote. Then they don't get what they thought they would get through that vote. But it takes a while for somebody who voted to say, oh, I might have been wrong. You don't want to admit that for a long time. So let's just see what happens in the negotiation. Let's see what happens when reality dawns. I don't think they will have a change of heart anytime soon. But let's just let them explain. Let the people in the UK know how many lies were told about this. Let them know, let them find out. I think that is very important for all of us. You know, we are in a society, you know, I'm a politician, I know, we try and make things more beautiful very often than they are because we want to convince. Some politicians even go so far as to lie. But there's also always a limit to that because if you get caught, you're out. Now, there's no punishment for lying. They lie, they get caught, they lie more, they get caught, they find alternative facts, they get caught, they find more alternative facts. We're in a new world. We are in a new world. And those of us who don't believe in this new world should, you know, make sure that we don't put facts and fiction on the same level. And what gives me hope is that there is a new understanding in the United States in journalism that to be fair is not to put the one side's facts on an equal footing with the other side's lies or fiction. Facts are facts. That the world is round and not flat is not an opinion, it's a fact, even though that there are still people who believe the world is flat. And I think this should be a guiding principle in how we communicate in politics. And that's the only way forward. That's the only way you have a sustainable answer also against populism.
Bueno, estamos fuera de tiempo. El vicepresidente tiene...
We're really not doing very well at all on time. The Vice President has an agenda in front of him. He should really spend the entire afternoon with us. But I was going to ask you one last question, but I think you've answered it already. You're a social democrat, and as many social democrats, there are difficult times in Europe with austerity, cutbacks, and oftentimes not much hope about rebuilding the welfare state. But I will ask you the question anyway. Are social democrats a species endangered of extinction?
Nothing is forever, but we ain't dead yet. And let me tell you one thing. And this is also, I think, a challenge and a warning to you young people. this society, we have a tendency to look for people who agree with us and to hug them and to say, oh, aren't we the guys who are right? Oh, wonderful. Even the internet stimulates that with the algorithms. If the internet search engines see what you want to see, they will give you what you want to see. There is, in education, a huge crisis. If we do not learn the beautiful art of critical thinking, of challenging our own assumptions as well, of admitting that sometimes we might be wrong, of checking whether what we think is right, of meeting people and talking to people with whom we passionately disagree. We cannot build a society if we don't find compromises with people with whom we don't agree. The fate, social democracy is about bringing together people who have different aspirations and different backgrounds, creating common destinies. Now, if everybody in Europe thinks that they are absolutely happy on their own little island with all the people that agree with them, then Europe will not exist, and our societies based on welfare will cease to exist. It will be gated community societies where the welfare will only be organized for those in one group, and solidarity becomes group solidarity and not societal solidarity. That's why social democracy is in trouble. When people don't want bridges, bridge builders are out of work. But our society needs bridges. You guys, you young guys, you're not ideological. You are not tempted by my ideology or others. But you are idealists. And please, please, be bridge builders. I'm not saying vote Social Democrat. You vote whatever you bloody well like. But be bridge builders. This society needs bridge builders. Without bridges, we live on islands and we sink all together. Thank you very much and good luck with your studies.
Muchas gracias a todos.